Little Red Wolf, A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing by Paul William Schumacher. So the story is based on the idea that the fairies had to flee Earth and go to another world where, in order to maintain their power, people have to keep believing in them. And therefore, they hand out mantles of power that allow humans to gain superpowers. These superpowers always come from the stories they're part of. So, Selena, our main character, ends up putting on the mantle of Little Red Riding Hood. Now, she is the hunter, as opposed to being rescued by one. She gets the red cloak. The red cloak has a couple minor magical abilities, like it's bright red and yet she can hide in the wilderness with it. Also, it keeps her temperature steady. So when she is in the blazing hot sun, she's not sweating the way everybody else is. And when she's trudging through the snow, she's actually relatively warm. Some of her... Now, there's kind of a half and half, though, because you can't just pick up any story and put it on. There has to be a resonance for the story to attach itself to the individual. So prior to putting on the mantle, Selena was already a hunter. She already has wilderness lore. She already had a bunch of different things, including the attention of the wolf. So when a magical witch known as a Baba decided to use her story, Old Mother Huld, based off, Old Mother Hulda, based off the German goddess of weaving, say like Grundhuld or something like that. I'm probably messing that up. But, you know, she's got her own story of power, a goddess of weaving. And so she weaves the power of the red cape, or the red cloak and cowl, which then she gives to the girl who is able to put that on. And then later on, that story can be passed along to somebody else, or somebody can complete their story. And if you complete the story, the mantle technically leaves you, but you have internalized some of the power. So it's like, if your power is at a 10 while you've got the mantle on you, the power may go down to a 5 when you take the mantle off. But if you complete the story, it is woven into the fabric of who you are, and therefore it will always be in you. This also allows people to take more than one story. It's also something that will come up later on in the third book, when it's discovered that, you know, the state of one's soul can actually be attached to whether or not they completed their story or not. Now, Selena, of course, will muddy the waters on this by taking on a bunch of different potential mantles, because you can take on more than one mantle at a time. But as you take on the various mantles of power, it starts to mess with you a little bit. You start getting pulled in multiple directions. Heck, you may even start to develop a form of schizophrenia as multiple powerful magics start trying to make you into what the stories want you to be. Because the stories, in a way, are almost semi-sentient. They want you to be more like the story that they are talking about. So, if you take on the Little Red Riding Hood story, the events of Little Red Riding Hood will start to synergize with your personality, with your life, and you'll start finding yourself in situations more similar to the story. Therefore, if somebody took on, also stories are broken down into different power levels depending on whether it's a nursery rhyme or a fable or a legend. Now, the legendary stories are things like Robin Hood and King Arthur, and stories from the Bible. Stories that have been around for a very long time that have a very deep root into a culture. The other thing you got to remember is that Earth actually does exist in this world. It's just they are not on Earth. And so the belief of people on Earth can also affect these stories. So the Book of Grimm's fairy tales is something that almost every single human child knows in the Western Hemisphere. And because there are so many humans that know the stories of Hansel and Gretel, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Rapunzel in her tower, Little Red Riding Hood, because of this, they have a lot of power within this world. And so in future stories, I'm going to explore the idea of religious myths and possibly even stories from the Bible. Don't worry, I won't touch the Quran. I'm too afraid to, well, first of all, I'm not Muslim, so I don't know those stories well enough. But also, I'm too afraid to touch those because there's enough crazy people in the world that might decide to target me. So I'm not even remotely going near that. So if I do anything that looks a little bit like the Quran, don't worry, that wasn't intentional. I'm not going near the Quran. But for the Holy Bible, I was raised Catholic, and at one point in my life, I was going to be a missionary. Didn't go that route, but I was thinking about it, and as a result, I have studied the Bible a lot over the years. And I have a firm enough grasp on those stories that I want to put some of that into my own books to see where they can go. After all, most of European literature for 2,000 years was based around the Bible. Great works of Chaucer and Milton from Paradise Lost. All of that stuff was all, based on the Bible one way or the other. So I think going back to some of those old tales might lead to some interesting stories. And now I have to go to work. See you all later.